Greetings, friends of the Empire. Today I'd like to tell you my favorite real estate story of all time. It also happens to be the most profitable, at least on a percentage basis. It was a tiny little property, but it's my favorite story to tell of all time. First, I have to give you a little bit of background information, as this story involves life insurance, real estate, some shrewd horse trading or negotiating, and my good friend Kevin Kruger. As many of you know, I began my career in the life insurance industry back in 1999. And at the time, Kevin and Sandy Kruger were among my very few married friends, so I called on them to peddle my wares. Well, I had a brief conversation with Kevin about cash value life insurance before he, being the soon-to-be CPA he was, informed me of what a big rip-off cash value life insurance was and let me know that he was going to be buying term and investing the difference. I, on the other hand, did go ahead and bought a permanent life insurance policy as soon as Ting Ting and I were married, and began building up cash value in the policy, protected from creditors, lots of tax advantages to it, yada yada, so on and so forth. Anyway, that's important to the story down the road. Well, fast forward about a dozen years, and I built up a decent little bit of cash value in my life insurance policy and a couple other policies I bought along the way. Kevin, Sandy, and Ting Ting and I had all formed Kaiser Properties back in 2002. We'd been pretty heavily levered up. We'd bought a number of properties between '08 and 2011. And so in 2011, when I went to buy the 8 units over on Husband Street, Kevin had to pass. Sandy had recently quit her job and gone back to school, continuing our education, and things were just a little tight. We'd spent a lot of money recently, and that's when I formed Moxie Properties to go off and do that deal on my own. However, when the property I'm going to tell you about today, 1117 South Adams, came available, I just knew this was going to be a heck of a deal. And I talked to Kevin, and we even drove over there and looked at it together. Said I really thought he'd want to get a piece of this. So anyway, when Rosetta Heffel, my Century 21 agent, brought this property to me, I went to the folks and took a look at the property. And, this was 2011. Lending standards were quite a bit higher than they had been in years past before the financial crisis. And even though this was a tiny little property and the loan was pathetically small, a couple of the folks that had the property under contract before couldn't get financing for it. And the deal had fallen through. Well, the lady that was selling the property had been promoted within her company and transferred to a different city. And by this point, her company had taken over the property. They just said, look, we're going to guarantee you X amount, and then we're going to go sell the property for you. So I was really dealing with a big corporation more so than the individual seller. But I told her I'd give her X amount for the property, and I'd pay cash, and she didn't have to worry about me following through on financing. Well, she responded and said, that's way too low. I won't take that, and counter-offer back and forth a little bit. And so finally I told Rosetta, I said, look, Rosetta, send him another offer. And this time send him my cash offer, the exact same offer I'd made him before. Or tell him I'll agree to their most recent counter-offer, but slip this financing addendum in there and let them know that if I don't get the loan that I want, I can back out at any time. Well, as I had suspected and certainly hoped, the company just said, no, that's fine. We'll take the cash offer. So, bought it at that price. So once I had the property under contract for what I believed was 75% of the X fair market value, I called up Kevin and I don't remember how I ended up there on a trip to Oklahoma, but Kevin and I went over and we looked at the property together. And so we're standing right out in front of this house. And I'm telling Kevin, I said, look, man, you've got to get a piece of this. I've told you from day one, you were the first guy that was crazy enough to invest with me, and we've had such a great partnership. You've got half of anything I do, and I think you need half of this. Let's do this property in Kaiser. He hemmed and hawed a little bit, and I really understood, going from a dual income family down to a one income because of the going back to school and whatnot. He just said he had to pass on it. At which point I said, well, why don't you borrow money out of that life insurance policy you bought? And then I quickly remembered, whoa, wait a minute. No, that was a term policy you bought, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, he cussed me up and down that day more than he did back in 1999 when I originally presented the permanent life policy to him. So after I closed on the property, I mean immediately after I closed on this property, I borrowed the money out of my life insurance, paid cash for the deal. I call up my banker, Chris Peterman, over at Payne County Bank, and I'm like, hey, Chris, I've got you this time. Finally, for the first time in my career, I'm going to get an honest appraisal out of you. It's always been a sticking point, an aggravation point more to me that so many of these home appraisers, they just ask the banker, hey, so what'd the house sell for? And for the most part, they go rubber stamp it. Occasionally they'll come back and say, well, it's 2,000 more or 2,000 less or whatever. But it's always aggravated me that more often than not, your appraiser comes back and stamps the exact price you paid for it. Well, I told Peterman, I said, I'm not telling you what I paid for this, and I know it hasn't hit the county courthouse yet, so finally I'm going to get an honest appraisal. So go get your guy out there, and then I'll take a mortgage on it from you. So I bought this property. We're going to call it at X minus 25%. I got a nice deal on it. And I expected that the appraiser was going to come back with somewhere around X. Well, he come back at about 8% over X. So I'm very happy about that. So I called Peterman back and said, all right, well, loan me 80% of the appraised value on this bad boy, and let's go to town. And so he does. And what that allowed me to do was I got enough out of the refinance that I was able to pay back the money I'd borrowed from my life insurance policy and still put several $1,000s of cash in my pocket. So basically I was paid to take this house, and it was cash flowing just fine. We got it rented out within a month, and it stayed rented the entire time I owned it. So then we move forward to 2015. And in 2015, I got a call out of the blue. I planned on owning this property for a very long time, and it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, dinky little home close to campus, great for renting to college kids. I had no intention of selling it until I get a call from this guy who asked me if I'd be interested in selling it. Which in my book, the only sane answer to that question is, well, absolutely not. I love that house. Great neighborhood. I'll never sell. I'm going to own that forever. And that's what I told the guy. But he was somewhat persistent, and he told me that, I own the house next door to it, and it sure would be nice to have a couple of them right here together. Really playing the country bumpkin act about, oh, good old boy, just want to make life easy. I'm a small-time guy, yada, yada. And I kind of got the feeling that he was playing that up a little bit. But anyway, I told him no, I wasn't interested in doing it. Well, he was rather persistent. He obviously convinced me he was really interested in buying it. So I started doing a little bit of research, got to looking on the county's website and figuring out who this guy is or who the company is. And I find out that not only does he own the house right next to my home, he also owns the one next to that, which happens to be on a corner lot on a very busy street in Stillwater that is currently under redevelopment. They're putting in all kinds of medical office facilities around there. And it's ripe for commercial development. And that's what he was going to do with it. He was just playing the country bumpkin card to try to throw me off and, buy at the best price. That's what he was trying to do. So I called him back and I told him, I'm still not interested in doing this, but I've done a little research around town and talked to some folks that we both know, and hey, I'd be interested in doing a joint venture with you. That's going to be a great corner to put a commercial property in. I own a piece of it. Let's do this together. Well, he wasn't interested in that at all. And so I told him, no, not going to sell it. Talk to you later. Well, a few days go by, and he emails me a time or two. And finally, I just told him, I said, look, there's a price at which I'll buy or sell any asset. And here's my price. And the price I gave him was what I'd paid for it, X times 2. And I also explained to him that I meant, look, that's going to be a net number to me. I'm not paying any closing costs. I'm not prorating my taxes. I'm not even going to prorate the rent that I've collected from the tenants that are in there or transfer the security deposit to you. Oh, and by the way, I'm also going to keep the mineral rights underneath it. But if you like it, if you want it that bad, that's the price. Well, he hemmed and hawed quite a bit. I got to talk to my partners, this and that. Yeah. But a couple days later, he called back and he agreed to it. So there you have it. My favorite story to tell, the most profitable on a percentage basis, and hey, Kevin, love you guys, but I couldn't help but just put a little "I told you so" in there and rub it in after our meeting back in 1999. Anyway, man, we'll keep up the good work with Kaiser and talk to y'all soon.